Once upon a time, in a village called EBUBE, there lived a madman named Kanu. Kanu looked like the earth itself had spit him out. His clothes were nothing but rags clinging to his body like leaves to a dying tree. His hair was wild, shooting out in every direction like the branches of a thorn bush. His face, covered in dirt, carried a strange look, half smile, half shadow. On his back was a big sack, sagged heavy like it carried a dark secret. Everywhere Kanu went, that sack followed like a snail and its shell. The villagers stared at him from their windows. "Who is this man?" One whispered. "He looks like he has no home, no family," another said, shaking her head. "He must be mad." Kanu didn't seem to notice their whispers. He walked straight to the big oak tree by the market square and dropped his sack. The tree stood tall, its branches stretching wide like a giant's arms. That was where Kanu made his home. He curled up under the tree and slept, the rain falling around him like a cold blanket. Mothers warned their children, "Stay away from that man. Mad people can harm you." The children nodded, but their eyes were curious. They wanted to know what was inside that sack. It was big, too big for a madman to carry, and it always seemed to smell of something strange, like dried leaves and burnt wood. But Kanu didn't bother anyone. In the mornings, he begged for food. The women gave him scraps, and he nodded in thanks. In the afternoons, he sat by the tree, chewing on sticks or throwing stones, like a child playing a lonely game. He muttered to himself words nobody understood, and sometimes he laughed a laugh that sounded like dry leaves crunching underfoot. The villagers pitied him. "Poor man," they said. "He's harmless," but still, no one dared to touch his sack. And so life in EBUBE went on, with Kanu sitting quietly under the oak tree, his sack always by his side, guarding its secrets like a crocodile guards the river. Little did they know, the rains that brought Kanu to their village also carried a storm far more dangerous, a storm with sharp teeth and no mercy. One fateful day, the village woke to the sounds of roosters crowing and women starting their morning chores. Little Zina, a bright-eyed girl of 7, skipped out of her hut with a small calabash in her hand. Her mother had sent her to buy palm oil from Mama Eng's stall. "Come back quickly, Zina," her mother called after her. "Don't stop to play." "I won't, Mama," Zina shouted, her voice like a sweet melody floating through the air. But Zina didn't return. At first, her mother waited patiently, thinking she had stopped to chat with her friends. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, worry began to creep into her heart. She stepped outside and called, "Zina, Zina." Her voice echoed through the village, but there was no answer. Soon, neighbors joined her, searching every corner of EBUBE. They checked the market, the stream, and even the bushes near the edge of the village. But Zina was nowhere to be found. Her calabash lay abandoned by the path, as empty as the hope. In her mother's heart. By evening, the whole village was buzzing with whispers. Where could she have gone? Some asked, could an animal have taken her? Others wondered. But one question lingered in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Could it be the madman? The women gathered near the market square, their voices hushed but sharp. "He's strange," one said, "always carrying that big sack. Who knows what's inside?" Another shook her head. "He's just a poor madman," she argued. "He wouldn't harm a child." Still, the suspicion hung like a shadow over Kanu. He sat under the oak tree, chewing on a stick, his sack resting beside him. As always, he didn't seem to notice the villagers' stares or hear their whispers. When someone asked him if he had seen Zina, he simply laughed, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "Mad people don't know anything," an elder said, shaking his head. "Let's keep searching." Night fell, and the village was swallowed by silence, broken only by the sound of Zina's mother sobbing into the darkness. The stars blinked coldly in the sky, as if watching over a secret they would never tell. Zina was gone, and EBUBE would never be the same again. Days rolled into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The memory of little Zina still haunted EBUBE like a shadow that refused to fade. Her mother's cries had grown quieter, but her sorrow hung in the air, heavy like the morning mist. Life in the village tried to return to normal, but the fear never truly left. Then it happened again. It was a quiet morning when Duro, a bright and curious boy of 10, was sent to fetch water from the stream. His laughter had always been like the chirping of birds, filling the village with joy. With his small wooden bucket in hand, he waved goodbye to his siblings. "I'll be back soon," he called. But Duro never came back. When the sun climbed high and there was no sign of him, his mother grew worried. She sent his older brother to check the stream. The bucket was there, sitting on the bank, but Duro was gone, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. His brother ran back to the village, shouting, Duro is missing." The news spread quickly. The villagers gathered once again, their faces pale and their hearts racing. "Not another child," they murmured, their voices trembling. They searched the stream, the bushes, and the nearby farms, but Duro was nowhere to be found. The fear that had been lurking now rose like a flood, drowning the village in panic. Mothers held their children close, refusing to let them out of their sight. Doors were locked as soon as the sun began to set, and the once lively village streets grew quiet and tense. As before, whispers about Kanu filled the air. "It must be him," one woman said, her voice low. "He came with that sack, and since then, children have disappeared." "But he's mad," another argued. "What would a madman want with children? He's always sitting under that tree, watching everything," someone else said. "What if he's pretending?" Despite the whispers, no one dared to confront Kanu. He sat under the oak tree, as always, chewing on sticks and humming to himself, his sack ever present, resting by his side, silent but suspicious. Fear spread like wildfire through EBUBE. Children no longer played outside, and even the bravest hunters hesitated to stay late in the forest. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. Yet, even with all their fear, the villagers kept their distance from Kanu. The thought of accusing him of opening his sack was too much to bear, and so the village lived in quiet terror, as if holding its breath, waiting for the next storm to come. However, when night fell, Kanu came alive. Under the shadow of the oak tree, he shed the mask of madness like a snake sheds its skin. His wild laugh turned to silence, his vacant stare sharp, open like the blade he carried from his sack. Kanu pulled out his knife, its edge glinting in the moonlight like the teeth of a hungry beast. He moved with the quiet grace of a leopard, his feet light on the ground. The night was his shield, and the darkness his ally. Kanu had a plan. He wasn't mad, he was clever. The villagers' pity was his cloak, their ignorance his weapon. He knew how to pick his victims, how to lure them without a sound. Children were easy. He would hide in the shadows, waiting for a small figure to pass by. Then he would leap out, his dirty face twisted in a mockery of friendliness. "Come here, little one," he would say, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "I have something for you, sweets, fruits, whatever you like." Too scared to scream and too tempted to run, the children followed, and when they got close enough, Kanu struck quick, silent. His knife moved like a viper, and the deed was done. Women were next. Those who fetched water late at night, thinking the path was safe, became his prey. Kanu would sit by the roadside, pretending to sleep. When they passed, he would rise like a ghost and grab them before they could cry for help. Even men strong, farmers and hunters who wandered too far into the forest, weren't safe. Kanu knew their routines, their weaknesses. He was patient, like a spider waiting in its web. With his sack heavier now, Kanu made his way deep into the forest, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. There, hidden among the shadows, was a small hut. This was where the ritualists waited, men with dark desires. They welcomed Kanu like an old friend, their faces eager and greedy. "A good worker," one would say, counting the heads. "You'll be rewarded well." Kanu would collect his payment, a bundle of coins or goods, and vanish back into the night. By the time the first rooster crowed, he was back under the oak tree, humming and chewing on sticks, the picture of a harmless madman. No one suspected. No one dared to ask. The sack that sat beside him held the village's darkest secret, a secret Kanu carried like a burden he had long grown used to. And so, while the village slept, Kanu thrived, his evil hidden in plain sight. Kanu's secret life carried on, but even the cleverest crocodile risked the river's wrath. 3 times, Kanu nearly met his end, but each time, he slipped away like oil on water. The first close call happened on a bright afternoon. A farmer's wife was returning from her farm, her basket filled with cassava. She walked past the oka tree and glanced at Kanu, sitting with his sack as always. Something caught her eye, dark, sticky drops sliding from the bottom of the sack. Blood. Her heart skipped a beat. She hurried home and told her husband, her words tumbling out like a broken pot. "There's blood on that madman's sack. You must go and see." The farmer gathered some men, their machetes gleaming in the sun. They marched to the oka tree, determined to confront Kanu. But as they approached, Kanu jumped to his feet, his eyes wide and wild. He began to shout, waving his arms like a mad prophet. "Leave me alone," he screamed. "The spirits are speaking to me. They will curse you if you come near." The men hesitated, fear creeping into their hearts. "Mad people have strong juju," one whispered. Slowly, they backed away, eating Kanu laughing under the tree, his sack untouched. The second time was in the deep of the night. A hunter returning from the forest saw Kanu dragging his sack through the bushes. The hunter crouched behind a tree, his curiosity burning like a flame. He followed quietly, stepping carefully to avoid making noise. Kanu stopped suddenly and turned, his eyes glowing like red-hot coals in the moonlight. The hunter froze, his courage melting like wax before fire. Without a word, he dropped his spear and ran back to the village, his heart pounding like a drum. "I saw him," he told the villagers. "His eyes were like fire. He's not mad, he's something worse." But fear kept the villagers from acting. The third close call happened one lazy afternoon. A group of boys, bored with their games, decided to dare each other. "Let's see what's inside the madman's sack," one said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Are you mad yourself?" another asked, but they all laughed and agreed. They crept up to the oka tree, their footsteps as light as cat paws. Kanu lay stretched out, snoring softly, his sack beside him. One boy, braver than the rest, reached out to lift the sack, but just as his fingers touched it, Kanu's laughter exploded like thunder. The boys screamed, dropping their sticks and running as fast as their legs could carry them. Behind them, Kanu's laughter followed, echoing like a ghost's wail. Though Kanu escaped each time, these close calls began to stir the air in EBUBE. The villagers felt unease creeping in, like a storm building in the distance. The oka tree, once just another part of the village, now loomed like a silent witness to something terrible. And Kanu, the madman, sat beneath it, his sack, guarding its secrets like a sleeping lion. Meanwhile, in the heart of EBUBE's palace lived Princess Ada, the jewel of the land. Her beauty shone like the morning sun, and her kindness was as soft as the evening breeze. Everyone admired her, for she treated even the poorest villager like family. Her laughter could chase away the darkest clouds, and her heart was as big as the sky. One market day, as Ada walked through the village with her maid, her eyes fell on Kanu. He sat under the oka tree, his sack beside him as always, chewing on a stick and humming softly. The villagers avoided him, their fear like an invisible wall around the tree. But Ada stopped and stared. "Why does everyone avoid him?" Ada asked her maid one day. "He's a madman, my princess," the maid replied, fear in her voice. "People say he's dangerous. He is still a human being," Ada said firmly. "No one deserves to be treated like an animal." The next morning, Ada brought a bowl of hot yam porridge to Kanu. "Here, eat," she said, her voice gentle. Kanu looked up, surprised. For a moment, his eyes softened, and he smiled a smile that seemed almost human. "Thank you," he muttered, taking the food with trembling hands. From that day, Ada visited Kanu, often bringing him food and even sitting to talk with him. She treated him like he was normal, asking about his life and listening to his mumbled answers. The villagers whispered, "Why is the princess spending time with the madman?" They asked, "Does she not see how strange he is?" But Ada didn't care about the whispers. She believed in helping people, no matter who they were. Her kindness shone Me rich beyond my dreams. The ritualist would pay anything for the king's daughter. And so, while Ada's kindness grew, Kanu's plans darkened. Behind every smile he gave her, there was a shadow, a hunger for the ultimate betrayal. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the village in a soft golden glow, I had gone to visit Kanu as usual. But when the palace gates closed and the stars filled the sky, she didn't return. Her maid, worried, went to the king. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing low, "the princess has not come back." The king's heart tightened. He ordered his guards to search the village. They went to the market, the stream, and every hut, calling, "Princess Ada, Princess Ada." But the night answered with silence. The villagers gathered, their faces pale with fear. What could have happened to her? They whispered. An old woman leaning on her walking stick spoke up. "Check the madman," she said, her voice firm. "His sack is always full, and it smells too sweet for a madman." The guards hesitated, but nodded. They marched to the oak tree. There the darkness. Kanu was there as always, sitting with his sack. He hummed to himself, rocking back and forth like a child. "What's in your sack?" one of the guards demanded, stepping closer. Kanu looked up, his eyes wide. "Spirits," he shouted, laughing. "The spirits speak to me. You cannot touch their home." But this time, the guards didn't back away. They grabbed the sack, their hands firm. Kanu screamed, clawing at them, but they tore it open. The village froze. Inside the sack was the head of Princess Ada, her golden hair still shining, her face frozen in a peaceful expression. Beside her were other heads, those of the missing villagers, Zena, Duro, and more. Gasps filled the air, followed by cries of horror. The kind princess, who had only wanted to help, had become the victim of the very man she tried to save. The guards seized Kanu, dragging him to the palace as he laughed wildly. The oak tree stood silent, its branches swaying in the night wind, as if mourning the secrets it had witnessed. The storm of sorrow and rage that followed was one ULTERIOR would never forget. Kanu was dragged to the palace, his hands bound with rough ropes, his feet stumbling on the dusty ground. The villagers followed, their wails piercing the morning air. The king sat on his throne, his face carved with grief. His beloved daughter, Princess Ada, was gone, her life snuffed out like a candle in the wind. When Khan was thrown to the ground, before him, the king's voice thundered like a storm. "You dare harm my daughter. You dare bring this darkness to my land." His sorrow filled the room, heavy as a mountain. Kanu, on his knees, looked up with a twisted smile. His wild eyes roamed the crowd. "Kill me if you must," he said, his voice steady. "But know this, I am not the only monster here." The crowd gasped, murmurs rippling through the hall like the rustling of dry leaves. "What do you mean?" the king demanded, his voice trembling with rage. Kanu laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You call me evil, but your own greed feeds the ritualists. You sell your lands, your children's future, for promises of wealth and power. Without you, there would be no market for the heads I brought them." The villagers fell silent, their faces pale. His words stung like a whip, each one a harsh truth they could not deny. "You pity the madman," Kanu continued, "but you should pity yourselves. It is your greed that poisons this land, not me." The king's sorrow turned to fury. "Enough," he roared. "You have taken what cannot be replaced. Your life will end today, and the evil you have brought will end with you." With a swift motion, the guards carried out the king's command. Kanu's laughter stopped, replaced by the quiet murmurs of the crowd. But his words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable, leaving the villagers ashamed and angry at themselves. The grief of Princess Ada's death was a fire that burned in the hearts of the villagers. They could no longer ignore the shadow that had grown over ULTERIOR. Kanu's words echoed in their minds, stirring both guilt and resolve. "We must destroy the ritualists," one elder said, his voice firm like iron. "They have feasted on our greed." For too long, led by the king's guards, the villagers marched into the forest. The trees loomed tall, their branches whispering secrets of old. Deep within, they found the small hut where Kanu had delivered his gruesome goods. Inside, the ritualists waited, their faces twisted with shock as the crowd stormed in. "No more," of your evil, the villagers shouted. They tore down the hut, their anger bursting like a dam. The ritualists were captured, their tools of darkness destroyed. The forest, once a haven for their wickedness, was cleansed with fire and prayers. But even as they triumphed, the loss of Princess Ada weighed heavy. Her kindness, her laughter, her light all gone, leaving a wound that would never heal. The villagers returned to EBUBE, their victory bitter with grief. From that day on, the people of EBUBE vowed to never trust blindly again. They learned to question, to see beyond appearances, and to guard their hearts against greed. The tale of Kanu, the madman with the sack of horrors, became a lesson for generations, a reminder of deceit, greed, and the price of blind trust. And so, the story of Princess Ada and the madman live on, carried by the winds of EBUBE, forever haunting the hearts of those who heard it. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching, and stay blessed.